We have more of our interview with Larry Correia and his book, In Defense of the Second Amendment, that just came out. Stay tuned. Honestly, don't you think that the good news here is that we're winning? 400 million plus privately owned arms in America today. A Supreme Court that says that you have to respect the right to keep and bear arms and you can't balance away your rights with the NYSERDA versus Bruin decision. The fact that, well, really, I mean, we can criticize Republicans on occasion. I certainly do. But we do, the Republicans that are good on guns control the House, preventing federal gun legislation. We have a series of victories in the courts going on all around the country. We've had more Second Amendment victories in the last 6 to 8 months than we had in the prior 15 years, for example. So is there a reason for optimism and hope here, Larry?
Absolutely. I am not one of the black pill doomers. And in fact, I end the book on a very positive note because I talk about my own personal journey as a Second Amendment guy. 30-something years ago, when I was a young man and I was getting into this, we were at the edge. We had the Bill Clinton years with the assault weapons ban. We all felt that we were 5 years away from losing our rights entirely. There was a continual push, and all the stuff we see in the media now, it all started back then. They've just become more clownish and ham-fisted with it, but it all started back then. And with the assault weapons ban, it woke a lot of people up, got a lot of people active. When I was young, we had concealed carry in, shall issue concealed carry, and we had may issue concealed carry in maybe 7 states, and we had 1 state with constitutional carry, which means you don't have to jump through any government hoops at all. Now, fast forward 30 years, we have 25 states. Fully half the states have constitutional carry, and Florida is pushing for it this year, which will bring us up to 26, and most of the country. And every state, after the Bruin decision, is now required to have shall issue concealed carry. That's a huge victory. We've had, like you said, Bruin. Before that, we had Heller. Was another Supreme Court decision was gigantic. Up until the Heller decision, we had a lot of doubts on what the court was going to do to us. Was the court just going to say, well, every other amendment is good for individual freedom, but the Second Amendment is a collective right that only belongs to the National Guard, which didn't exist for another 100 years after they wrote it. It doesn't make a lick of sense, but we also didn't know what was going to happen. Heller decision came along, and suddenly it was a huge victory for us. I mean, so over 30 years, I have seen this pendulum swing. Plus, the most important one of all is the cultural battle. We have this thing where we have kind of abdicated the culture war to the left and let them dictate all the terms and let them say, these are the correct rules of civility. Guns are bad. You defending yourself is bad. That's very uncouth. Leave it to the police. Well, that's changed. I have seen that swing so much over the last generation. It's been so fascinating. And it's interesting because in 2020, we reversed 30 years of downward crime trends. We jumped, in 1 year, we jumped all the way back to 1993. This entire time, crime has been going down. Violence has been going down. As more people have been armed, as more people have been going about armed, as more states have concealed carry, as more states have fallen before the Supreme Court and allowed people to have guns in their home for self-defense. Our murder rate was going down this entire time as we were buying incredible record numbers of guns. And so I am very much white-pilled optimist. I believe that the future... I believe we're going to have several years now after the Bruin decision where the left is going to throw basically a tantrum. And I got this on an interview the other day with Cam Edwards, and he said this, and I thought this was very wise. I hadn't thought of this before, but he said something effective. If you look back at the civil rights battle after Brown versus Board of Education, there was about a 5-year period where the Democrats threw a giant tantrum and tried to shove through every single segregationist law they could, to the point that even a lot of places in America shut down their public schools entirely, right? What happened after the Bruin decision? Democrats threw a tantrum. Several more states were trying to shove through assault weapons bans, which were clearly unconstitutional. The ATF does the new brace ruling, which is a crazy federal overreach. And so I think we're seeing the same thing. We have a civil rights victory, and we're going to have Democrats throw a tantrum. What happened last time? Several years of pushing craziness before an eventual victory for civil rights. And that's where I think we are.
I think that's a great point, Larry. In your book, In Defense of the Second Amendment, one of the things you talk about is the kind of the concept of force multiplying and culture and things like this. Now, as a novelist, especially a hugely best-selling novelist of the Monster Hunter series, which I think you've now brought all that expertise and knowledge to, in defense of the Second Amendment, in addition to the fact that you used to be in the gun business before you were a novelist. You brought all that to bear, which really is a great synergy here. But I do want to talk a little bit about culture. Now, Andrew Breitbart, the late Andrew Breitbart of Breitbart, used to always like to say that politics was downstream of culture, that if you could influence the culture of a society, you ultimately would influence the politics. So what we see now, Larry, as best I can tell, is especially among the younger generations, they seem to be, I don't want to generalize too much here because it's hard to do that, but I'm going to try a little bit. You have almost like a little TikTok generation going on, or these wedded to social media. They seem to not necessarily be learning about the importance of the right to keep and bear arms. You have a push, as I see it, in many parts of education to literally say that the heroic America, the heroic patriots that took on the greatest army and military in the world that was so strong that eventually they defeated Napoleon, the British Empire, and won for freedom, that these are people who are evil, the Second Amendment is evil, the Constitution is evil, the right to keep and bear arms is evil, guns are bad, so on and so on and so on. So it seems like there is a push in the culture, parts of American culture, to try to denigrate, private gun ownership. But again, you have successfully been able to carve out a niche and succeed in this sort of bad American culture. Parts of it are bad American culture. What advice would you give for the Second Amendment movement about how we can help influence American culture in favor of our Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment?
Actually, this is a huge one, and this is something that a lot of people on our side miss because they look down on the culture thing. They've just abdicated that to the left. They just assume Hollywood, all actors are leftists, writers. I mean, my industry's out of Manhattan, so it's 99% liberal. And so everybody has this attitude as like, we've just abdicated that. But what happens is you got kids growing up and they're reading this, and if they're watching TV or reading books, and every single incident in the book where there's civilian gun ownership, it's usually to be, look at these violent racist rednecks, or look at these crazy stupid vigilantes, or, oh no, somebody got a gun to defend themselves, but they shot themselves on accident, or they shot their wife on accident, and here's a big tragic story. It's all rigged. And if you're watching it, and like the only people that use guns effectively are the cops or the state, and Hollywood will talk you, oh, guns are bad, guns are bad, guns are bad. And then they'll make a movie where the hero kills 2,000 people with a gun, but that's okay because he's special. There's something unique about him that makes him special where the rest of you, we're just peasants. We shouldn't do that. So the key to this, honestly, is fighting back, and this is twofold. If you're a creative, you're an artist, a writer, video games, comic books, whatever it may be, get your stuff out there. Don't be a leftist where you preach harder than you entertain. You got to entertain first. But like me, I write the gun nuttiest fiction there is. Like I write sci-fi and fantasy novels, and it is super gun nutty, and everything is I mean, I'll have fantastical creatures, but by golly, everything in there is tactically and technically correct. Right? That's what I do. That's my thing, and I came to great success because there was a huge audience of regular red state Americans out there who were just dissatisfied with their current entertainment products. This culture war is nefarious, too, because we come from industries, like I said, primarily out of Manhattan, primarily out of Silicon Valley, big tech. I'm going to plug another author for a second, another fiction author. His name's Peter Nealon, Nealen. Peter's a former Marine, great guy. He's got a series of action thrillers, very gun nutty, also very technically accurate. So Peter's doing this. Amazon flags his books for being inappropriate and wouldn't let him put his books on Amazon because on the cover he has the characters from the book in an action scene. They're shooting guns on the cover. Amazon stopped this because that was inappropriate, which is highly ironic considering how many millions of products has Amazon sold that have that kind of thing. But if it was an inconvenient thing for them, they'll label it glorifying violence. So, for example, support artists like Peter. I don't want to say support artists like me. I'm doing okay, all right? Read my books if you want. But there's a lot of people out there that are fighting this culture war. And the left, the social justice cancel mobs are continually trying to cancel us. Like I'm the guest of honor at a convention in Virginia next year, and they're currently trying to get me thrown out of that. Why? Because of my disgusting ideas. When pressed to find out what are my disgusting ideas, it's stuff that basically any regular Republican would believe. They cited the fact that I was a white male gun owner. Was one of the things. And you know what, people, the culture war, if you want to maintain our rights, not just the Second Amendment, but we want to maintain all of our rights, it is vital that we take back our culture. So support artists who do, and if you're an artist, don't be afraid to speak up and get your stuff out there. And I think that's what it's going to boil down to. It's going to be a long fight on that front.
Larry, I think that's great advice. So let me ask you a couple questions. As a novelist and author of the recently released In Defense of the Second Amendment book, which is a great read, I encourage our audience here at the Four Boxes Diner to pick up a copy. We know that books and writing can really change minds. I mean, if you look over history, Larry, there's books like Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand that really opened the eyes about the role of capitalism in life. 1984 by George Orwell. You have Brave New World by Huxley. Countless examples of this. So you're uniquely situated to answer this question, Larry, because you're both a successful nonfiction writer and, of course, a successful novelist. So right now, in terms of books that are already out there, what do you think are the best books that kind of would help change minds or influence people as to how they see the right to keep and bear arms in American life? Are there any particular books that already exist that you think are on par or have the ability to sway minds the way, like, again, Atlas Shrugged and 1984 and the like has done in other contexts?
That's an interesting one because on the more philosophical narrative side of things, I would cite my own because I didn't think there was a lot out there like that, so that's kind of what I was shooting for. Now, as far as changing minds, there's a few that I would recommend that are classics. One is I have to say would be I'm actually got my Amazon tab open here. 1 second. Let's see, Deadly Force by Massad Ayoob. That is a classic. It's been around for a very long time. That is a fantastic book, and that's a book I recommend for anybody who is on the fence about self-defense and defending yourself. Read that. If you are a woman and you are interested in self-defense, armed self-defense, and that, I would recommend a book a little more obscure than the first one, but it's called The Cornered Cat, A Woman's Guide to Concealed Carry by Kathy Jackson. And that one is aimed. It's by a female instructor for a female audience, but for the women in the audience, I highly recommend Cornered Cat. And then the last one I would actually is a classic known to all gun people. All gun people have this book. Every one of us owns a copy of this book, and it's More Guns, Less Crime by Dr. John Lott. The thing about that is it is extremely academic. It is very dry. However, it's excellent, and it is something that I cite in my book a lot. I cite it several times for various things. But that is one that, like, really, truly, it was the groundbreaking book that kind of laid down for the gun debate. That, like, before this book, a lot of people thought the stats were on the gun banner side. No, they are not. That's how it's presented on the news, but very decisively they are not. So I would recommend, those are 3 books that I would recommend off the top of my head that I think would be good primers for this. And then me, like I said, I come at it a little more funny and philosophical and colloquial. Let's put it that way. Mine is a little more talking to the masses.
Well, Larry, let me ask you this. Now, I'm going to really put you on the spot now because I may be creating work for you or your friends out there. But so here's the question I'm going to ask for you, Larry. So we just talked about, your excellent series, the Monster Hunter series. It's very gun friendly. A lot of great gunplay discussions of that. Wonderful series. And we've talked about your book, In Defense of the Second Amendment. And some other people have written books that you've recommended. Now I'm going to really put you on the spot, which is what book or movie or play or TV show or series that does not exist right now that you really, really would like to see out there, whether you write it or someone else writes it? What is the one thing you'd like to see? I always like to tell people that, if you find a book that you really, really want to read, but you can't find it, maybe you should be the one that writes it. So is there any book out there, or TV series, movie, or whatnot, that you think really should be out there that addresses Second Amendment issues that doesn't exist?
Actually, and I would do this from the fiction side. I do this as an entertainment product. Once again, culture and whatnot. And I'm going to toot my own horn once again, because I'm an extremely gun-nutty fiction writer. But there's a book called Hard Magic. It's the beginning of a series I did. It's alternate history. It's set in 1932, Great Depression, and actually it's an action adventure thing, and it's about basically 1930s superheroes, if you will. But really, what this book is actually about, like the theme behind it, is the big question is. Does the government own the people, or do the people own their government? Because what it is FDR is president. The enemy in this book is Imperial Japan, and it's really kind of comes down to that thing we talked about earlier about the control versus freedom, and the elites who think they can manage everything, and the people who would let mankind manage themselves. And so. That said, it would make it a big action. I hope they spend $200 million on it, make a big action adventure movie, millions of people watch it. It's actually a great story. It was one of the best things I've ever written. But I think honestly, the themes that are in it, the deeper themes of Hard Magic are actually important. And I think honestly, it is a very pro Second Amendment book. Even though I'm not a preachy writer when I write my fiction. I don't beat the reader over the head with like my message. I try to entertain first. By far. But yeah, if I could do one to make a blockbuster movie out of, it would be that. That said, I have optioned that. A studio owns it, so, knock on wood. But, optioning stuff to Hollywood's weird. Hollywood is a strange place. I don't know what they do.
It's interesting, Larry. Speaking of Hollywood, one of the things, of course, in the news now is the fact that Alec Baldwin has been, charged for a crime in New Mexico for, killing someone. Obviously, he didn't do it on purpose, but the allegations are that he was really negligent as to how he handled, reckless as to how he handled the gun, and someone unfortunately died from that. That's the allegation, according to the New Mexico prosecutors. So, Larry, here's something I thought about saying on Fox News. It didn't quite come up when I was talking about this last week. It was this. I wonder whether or not that Alec Baldwin is actually a victim of sort of being anti-gun. And what I mean by that is, if you are familiar with guns, if you're sympathetic to guns, you understand guns, you would never, ever, ever in a million years point anything that looks, feels, or is a gun in any way, shape, or form at anything you didn't want to shoot to destroy. You just do it automatically, right? It's instinctive at this point. I was wondering whether or not Alec Baldwin really is a victim of being an anti-gunner, because he didn't have that ingrained in him just naturally by virtue of living the life of a gun culture. And I wonder if at the end of the day he's going to pay a heavy price for being anti-gun, because again, based on the allegations, he pointed a gun that he thought was unloaded, but he pulled the trigger, or something happened, even if it didn't pull the trigger, although it looks like he did, but even if he didn't pull the trigger, it went off and killed someone. Either way, he shouldn't have been pointing a gun at a human being, as I see it. That's the basic rule of guns. Any thoughts about Hollywood, Alec Baldwin, and what may have happened out there? Of course, we weren't there. We don't know.
Honestly, that story is such a tragic one. And it's such a tragic thing. And I do talk about it in the book. I go over the basic rules of gun safety that we all date. Now, obviously, making a Hollywood movie, there's going to be some different protocols in place, because obviously there are going to be times when they have to, do things in regular life we would consider unsafe, because they're reenacting scenarios and so on and so forth. That said, Hollywood has protocols in place. Movies have safety protocols in place that way when they do violate those basic rules of gun safety, there's other rules at play to keep this exact thing from happening. And I remember when this was first happening, and a bunch of people were like rushing to Alec Baldwin's defense. Another actor, also a Baldwin, but Adam Baldwin, no relation, friend of mine, a great guy. He was, Jane from Firefly, great guy. He gets on there and he said, "No, this is not how our rules work. It's like, these are the standard procedures that we follow in Hollywood when we're making a movie, when we're handling a firearm." And so yeah, he didn't just violate the basic rules of gun safety. He violated the extra rules that they're supposed to do to specifically protect the crews of movies. And so if Alec Baldwin wasn't so flippant and anti-gun, would he have been more, would he have been not so lax in obeying their safety rules? Almost assuredly. It's not usually the gun nuts that are shooting people on accident, because we eat, sleep, live, and breathe this stuff. And in fact, speaking of Hollywood actors that chimed in on this, the foreword of my book is from Nick Searcy, famous actor. He was from Justified, Terror on the Prairie, great guy, wonderful human being, hilarious dude in the foreword. But Nick, same thing. They have these protocols, they have these rules. We obey these rules for the safety of ourselves and for the crew and the other actors. Alec Baldwin didn't do that. But Alec Baldwin, and the part that's sad about this is Alec Baldwin has lived his entire life as a public figure demeaning gun owners and calling us every horrible thing you can think of. So on one level amongst the gun culture, there is this element of like, haha, look at that guy. He talks so much trash about us, and look how this turned out for him. But really, it's a tragic story, and a young woman lost her life because somebody got careless and stupid. And that's what it comes down to. And so the whole thing, honestly, it's just a sad story, But honestly, anybody who works with firearms at all, guys, those safety rules are there. Learn them. I talk about this in the book when I'm talking about getting new people up to speed. Safety is number one. Everything else comes after that. You got to learn the safety rules, and you got to learn the protocols, and you got to obey them.
Yeah, that's great advice, Larry. And again, given the fact that you were in the gun business before you became a best-selling novelist and now a nonfiction author of the great new book, In Defense of the Second Amendment. Hope you enjoyed that continued interview with Larry Correia, Alvin's book, In Defense of the Second Amendment. If you haven't subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner, please do so. We'd appreciate it. And we'll see you again soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.